Hello everyone, David here. Welcome to another edition of Gamecube Classics, and I know some of you are very much anticipating my Spider-Man 2 Gamecube Classics review. But before I get to that one, I want to talk about another Marvel property that did manage to find its way into my collection via a movie tie-in. Why? I'm still asking myself this very same question. What is it now? 15 years later? Now thinking back to the Hulk 2003 movie tie-in video game. Why the hell do you own this, David? If you guys go back and check out my review, my classic in-depth review of the Ang Lee 2003 Hulk movie, there I mentioned that for some particular reason, at the ripe age of 12 years old, I was obsessed with the Hulk movie by association because of the Spider-Man movie. It was the Spider-Man movie that made me go, holy shit, these Marvel movies, they're a Marvel. So I was just so jacked on how awesome Spider-Man was that when Hulk came around and I watched it, I was like, I gotta have the movie tie-in game, I gotta have the DVD, I gotta watch this thing a billion times. And that's exactly what I did, and I managed to acquire Hulk for the Gamecube, and it managed to be added to my Gamecube collection, so it fits to being into the Gamecube Classics line. So I thought I would break my heart and figure out how exactly did the Hulk movie game age 15 years later.
All the rage. All the power. Unleash the fury. Hulk, the game.
After all this time, there's one thing that I will give the Hulk movie game a pass for, and that is the story. I appreciate that they did something that's a little bit out of the box, because it's going to be a little bit tough to adapt a movie about a man that has psychologically traumatic issues that revolve around his dad being very temperamental and somewhat psychotic. So exploring that father-son dynamic might not exactly be the most fruitful element to be used in a video game. So what they did is that they took the foundation of the movie and then used that as kind of like a predecessor to this game, which is then in turn kind of like a sequel. It kind of progresses things after the movie without dancing, while at the same time dancing around potential spoilers from the movie. Like, the movie ends in a certain way that this movie does not exactly pick up from, but it does it in a way where it's like, okay, you can kind of suspend some disbelief and say that maybe this game takes place about a year after the events of the movie. So it's like, okay, you're kind of exploring some new ground. I give you some credit for that. As far as describing the main story, though, that's a little bit more perplexing because it does take a much more comic book route than the movie did. Because the movie, despite its editing style with the panels and the images that are just really mind-boggling, whether it be for better or for worse, this game, however, takes its comic book roots and really goes 100% with them, including characters like the Leader, Rampage, Half-Life, as well as also applying this art style that is not really what you were expecting at a movie tie-in games at the time. This came out in 2003, so this was hot on the heels of the Spider-Man movie game, as well as various other movie tie-in games of other comic book movies that were starting to kind of come into their own, where they were taking this photorealistic approach. The Hulk did something a little different, where it took pretty much that very cartoony style and applied it to certain elements that were adapted from the movie, whether it be Bruce Banner's portrayal physically or other characters, and then kind of meshed it in with some really exaggerated caricatures of other people or other creatures, such as Half-Life or Rampage or Ravage. I'm sorry, Rampage. Who am I talking about? As well as Half-Life. Adding this little cel-shaded style to it that looks exaggerated, but it kind of fits. Considering that your protagonist is a giant green monster, this art style actually befits the game rather well. And I found it kind of fascinating how charming some of these design choices and animation styles really won me over, especially when you take into account some designs look a little better than others, and then there's some weird movements that some of these characters do where you're like, that's not exactly how a human moves or how they would exactly elicit their body language.
We kill our hostage. It's that simple.
He really likes the point, doesn't he? But yet, it would still make me chuckle in a very charming and endearing way. So I'm like, okay, I'll groove with this. What's not 100% charming would have to be the sound and audio aspect of the game. The soundtrack for this game, really repetitive and kind of earwormy, but in a negative sense where I'm just like, what the hell is this? As well as some mixture of tones, like in one moment it's very edgy and very early 2000s. And then in another aspect, it kind of mimics a little bit of that classic music from the 1970s Lou Ferrigno show, the old 1970s show with the little piano as well as the trumpets and things like that. What's with the Frank Capra music? If it was a bit more cohesive, then I would kind of vibe with it, but it was just jumping all over the place, and it would also get super repetitive during certain missions where it's just the same musical notes, melodies over and over, and I'm like, dun 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 dun. Yes. These movie tie-in games, they have to do a little bit better with their music placement. The same could also be kind of said for the voice talent. There's some voice work in this game that's a little bit atrocious. There's others that are a little bit charming and endearing about how over the top they're being with their characters, where I'm like, okay, that was affably bad, but in a good way, if that makes any kind of sense. I mean, it's a movie time game. What do you really expect? Easy paycheck. And then amongst the center of it all is Eric Bana, very renowned actor, coming off of the filming of the Ang Lee movie and then going into the recording booth for 4 hours, or maybe even less than that, probably like an hour or two, to record his lines for this game. And it's funny because it's also a little bit of a mixed bag in that sense. There's certain aspects and certain scenes where his voice is a little droll and weary, just like it was in the movie. And then there would be other scenes where he was way more charismatic than he was via Ang Lee's direction. And I was like, okay, what exactly did they tell you? And how couldn't you have done that in the movie?
Could Crawford really have created the Gamma Orb alone? He's an intelligent man, but to make that breakthrough would take genius.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, at the time there was a significant drought of Hulk games. It was very hard to really nail down a good Hulk game, at least until much later, even after these movie tie-in games. So playing as the Hulk was very crucial and essential for these developers to get right, but considering it was a movie tie-in game, that left so much up into interpretation. So the game tackles two different separate forms of playing the game. You play as either the Hulk or Bruce Banner, and it's kind of half and half. I want to say maybe leans more on the Hulk than it does Bruce Banner. I want to say about 60-40, a very even 60-40, or maybe even 65-35. But the majority of the game, you do kind of play as the Hulk. And playing as the Hulk is really where you want to really set your gameplay ambitions towards, because that's where you get to have the most fun, because everybody wants to play as the Hulk. Everybody wants to be a raging monster and destroy the shit out of environments and kill some people. And initially the game starts off as that, as really fun, because you are the Hulk. You do feel this power, especially when you're going up against really puny enemies. And the first moment in this game during the opening level that gives you kind of like a tutorial as to how you handle the Hulk and how you're able to destroy environments, you get that feeling of power. You get a genuine sense of power grabbing these little military men and then throwing them around. The very first time I grab a guy and I throw him across the way, or I throw him into a sign, that sign breaks, I'm like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. Or you pick him up and you slam him down into the ground. Despite becoming a serial killer as the Hulk, it's an awful lot of fun initially.
Kill me!
Yep, Hulk is that homicidal. And then as the game progresses, you learn new moves as the Hulk. You take advantage of your rage meter, where you're able to power up moves and you're able to do some combos that are not exactly the best combos, because the trade-off of playing as the Hulk is that eventually he's going to become slow. Over time, you're going to want to break out of your chains of wanting to be much more mobile, kind of like other characters like Spider-Man or whatever amongst the Marvel pantheon, but you're restricted to the Hulk, so you have to realize that you are going to be a little bit slow, especially when you start to change up the enemy styles, because over time, you do encounter new enemies such as the Gamma Dogs, or new forms of the soldier that are like specific Alcatraz guards, and then eventually the game throws in enemies that are much more powered to match your power, without going into spoilers, even though it's a fucking movie tie-in game. I don't know why I'm worried about spoilers, but the game starts to change up the enemy variety, which is kind of cool, except the gaps in between the changes of enemy variety are super wide, because over time, it just starts throwing you wave after wave of enemies as you progress through the level, and the gameplay does start to get stale. Even if you're playing as the Hulk, I don't know how this was manageable, but over time, pressing the same punch buttons or doing the same combos over and over, eventually it wears out thin, especially when you go through like 5 or 6 waves of enemies and you don't exactly know when the level's going to end. It starts to get a little infuriating. Did I die? Oh, wow, I wasn't even paying attention to my health. Goodness gracious. Oh, for that fucking sake. I remember one of the big things that the developers were talking about that was what they thought was a big hook for this game was that the destructible environments are very interactive when it comes to destroying them, but also the physics and the mechanics of how these pieces of debris and rubble fall are going to be different every single time. Yeah, dude, let me give you a hint. None of that shit matters if your gameplay is not fun. And it starts off a little empowered and kind of cool, but over time it wears thin. It's like you had one little cool thing and then you just stretched it for the majority of the time that you're playing as the Hulk in this game, and that just does not cut it. Even if you introduce several different types of enemies, if those types of enemies last too long on the screen or too long within the momentum of the game, then the pacing is thrown off, which then comes in some of the boss battles that are interwoven amongst the story that are kind of cool. In fact, there's actually a few boss battles that are really, really fun, but over time, the game then kind of exploits your slowness, gets kind of frustrating, and even by the end, the game starts to kind of rinse and repeat those bosses over and over again. Again, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but some bosses that you thought you had defeated, they come back, they're even stronger, and there's no exact upgrade system for the Hulk, so it's like, okay, well, now you're just piling and piling and piling, and that's not fun. So if playing as the Hulk becomes this much more repetitive and very not fun and frustrating, then we gotta rely on Bruce Banner to kind of change up the pace and really slow things down, but in a much more methodical way, very akin to the scientist himself. I want to say that it's on par with that of the Hulk, where it starts off kind of interesting, taking a very stealthy approach to what Bruce Banner needs to do, except there's some aesthetical choices that they make with Bruce Banner in terms of his stealth, and by that I mean, why the fuck is he trying to be stealthy around a maximum security installation or location or whatever, and yet he's dressed that way? I don't comprehend. I don't know what this guy's supposed to be uber smart, and yet he makes some ridiculous choices such as that one, or trusting certain things that aren't exactly meant to be trusted. And then moving on to the gameplay angle, the stealth is kind of fun, but also very rudimentary at first, and then over time, much like the Hulk, becomes repetitive, and they even try to throw in some puzzles that aren't exactly puzzles, they're more like sequences that you have to either align a certain thing or you have to pull some levers, and that stuff also gets rudimentary and very bland, especially when the game itself indicates you with a big-ass arrow saying, hey, here, you pull this lever right here, now pull this one. You know, the point of a puzzle is to puzzle me.
I've got to move the pairs of
This
symbols
symbol's
until I
all I
get
can
the
imagine
series.
here is.
So that style of playing as Bruce Banner mixed in with the gameplay of the Hulk mashes up to an experience that lasts how long, Angry Joe?
4 hours!
Yep, very standard movie tie-in expectation from a video game in terms of running time. And there's not much really to warrant a replay or any other kind of extended play within the game aside from some challenge modes where all you really do is play as the Hulk and you go up against literally wave after wave of enemies. And there's certain conditions thrown in, but for the most part it's just seeing how long you can last in this horde of enemies. And essentially that's just it. It's horde mode, it's a time waster, trying to rack up a high score, and that's pretty much really it in terms of anything that you can kind of do on the side. You could try to unlock some of the little doodads and bonuses that the game throws in that are mostly little promotional items for the movie, whether it be the trailers or behind the scenes featurettes, how did they do the visual effects, or how they made the game, stuff like that. But get this, some of those cheat codes, which I was very excited to learn about, have to be inputted inside of the game. So you need to load the game up, load up a specific level of the game, jump into it, and then explore the environment until you find a terminal where you can input these codes in. Yeah, most of us that want to do a cheat code, want to input a cheat code for a video game, are doing a cheat code for a reason. It's because we're lazy to do that one thing, so we want like an extra bonus or an extra power up. So we're gonna be lazy from the get-go to want to jump into the game just to put in a goddamn code. Guys, the Spider-Man game that I already reviewed, which you can check out on my channel, did show some more blemishes over the test of time, but it still had some charming values to it, but more importantly, some gameplay elements generally did not age and actually felt like they still held up all these years later, that still retained a decent amount of fun. The Hulk game from the 2003 movie, much less so. In fact, it broke my heart even more, realizing just how bland and basic and repetitive it started to get towards the very end, where playing as a giant green monster being able to destroy so many things felt like a very wasted opportunity. So I'm going to be giving Hulk, the 2003 movie tie-in game, a low 6 out of 10. Definitely one of the entries in my collection that I still feel nostalgic for, knowing that I have had this as part of my childhood playing through the GameCube, but it's definitely not a game that I want to replay anytime soon. Not even for some of its charming elements that had me going and had me felt like I was living through the experience, or through this 4-hour experience, and helped me get through over to the very end. Yeah, I still felt defeated by the end. I was like, okay, fuck this. Anyways, that about does it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you guys have played the Hulk 2003 movie time game, whether it be for the PS2, the GameCube, or the Xbox. Let me know your guys' fondest or very least fondest memories in the comments below. Make sure you support this video by hitting the like and share button. And of course, do not forget to subscribe for more GameCube classic videos coming very soon, including that very anticipated one on Spider-Man 2, because I know you guys want it, I know you guys desire it, and I'll hopefully get to that very, very soon. Until next time, guys, see you all later. Hey, wait a minute. Haven't I seen this before? Oh, God! Oh, God, no! Shut it down! Shut it down!